Assembling the side, getting the flux on, the pieces are about to be joined. The spacer that'll be used, hold it up. And then 2 long outside pieces. I'm doing this, I'm going just for tack type solder joints, not for full coverage of the length of the joint. It doesn't seem to be necessary and just raises the chances for having more of a mess on the outside to clean up. These 2 little blocks are set to the right width. This one also then is used, and that basically just holds it all square. So heat up the joint. Put a little solder in. That's the first tack. Continue down. And then we repeat the same thing for the other side. Now the glass isn't in here permanently yet, but it is acting as a spacer and to help square up the piece. Much easier than trying to do these apart. And then it also does confirm that everything fits. An alternate way of putting the sides on is to leave one end open as you get the initial corners put in place. It seems to give a little bit more working room. Don't forget to put the glass in. If you don't put the glass in before the solder sets, you'll end up with those crossbars being crooked or high or just misaligned, and then it can be a bear to get them straightened out. So it's better to start off with the glass, and even though it gives you very tight working quarters. And sometimes you need a prop. There we go. And the longer you wait, the more oxidation on the solder and the less it wants to take. And that's it. And you can see inside joint. Now it's time to solder the roof and the sides together. So use a jar or other suitable fixture to hold it, hold the roof, center up the sides, and then it's a matter of tacking this together. So it's just basically a blob of solder at each corner is what's going to be needed to hold this together. Goes fairly quickly. I don't know if I can hold that so you can see it. And you're heating both the roof and the sides simultaneously. But not so much that you loosen up the prior joints. It does seem to be reasonably forgiving. It is important to have tinned the roof ahead of time. That is one of the last steps in making the roof. Otherwise, it really doesn't seem to want to flow very well. And you're, again, risking the other joint coming apart. There. That's all there's to it. Alternatively, you can use the torch to solder the pieces in, although you need to pull the glass up to avoid it cracking under the heat. So if we start in this corner, pull that little solder ball off later. I like to get both the side frame and the vertical piece soldered in. And then we just work our way around. And move to the opposite corner before you actually don't work around in a circle. Try and get the opposite corners tacked first. Otherwise, it kind of tends to go off center. There we go. Strips for the base are placed on the pieces of glass. They all get fluxed. Being careful not to go all the way to the end, because we don't want it to wick out up from under these strips and seal the whole thing shut on us. Then the base is put on. And the screws, these are number 8 stainless screws that are just run into the corners of the adjustable U-channel. And then carefully tighten down. All right, then invert it, and we're ready to solder. Now, you have to be very careful to not overheat the glass or let your flame dwell in any one spot. Otherwise it'll crack and you end up making new ones. So we just pan it back and forth until you start to see the discoloration of the brass. Don't rush it. It takes longer on the first side. The subsequent sides go faster. And then if you got it hot enough, it'll just wick underneath and basically clean itself up. And think of the same process in plumbing fittings. Or it really kind of wants to follow the heat. All right, what I'm trying to do now is center it and get it back to vertical. And on to the next side. You may ask why, if there's a risk of breaking glass, you'd use the microtorch instead of the soldering iron. You'd end up with a much neater joint. The soldering iron kind of drags solder all over the surface and doesn't look as nice. The final soldering step is to fit the base. And this uses a 1/2-inch plumbing adapter, copper pipe to threaded. Simply file off or grind the face so you got a nice mating surface. Line it up on the X, just by eyes close enough, and then heat the fitting. That's it. Bigger torch, just heat the fitting itself. Don't bother with the brass plate because you might loosen everything else up. And that's it for the soldering.